is an internationally acclaimed orthopedic trauma surgeon and best-selling author who was on the faculty of the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine as vice chairman of the Department of Orthopedics and was the chief of orthopedic surgery at San Francisco General Hospital. Dr. Day has hosted her own nationally syndicated radio talk show and has recently produced a best-selling video titled "Why Cancer Doesn't Scare Me Anymore." She's been invited to lecture extensively throughout the United States and the world, and she's appeared on numerous radio and television shows, including 60 Minutes, Nightline, and the 700 Club. We joined Dr. Day's lecture at the convention as she recalls her own experience with cancer.
When in fact I found out that I had cancer, people say, well, what did that do to you? Well, for about 45 minutes I was depressed, I'll admit it. And then I thought, well, I know what to do about this. This is crazy to be depressed. And so I decided that I would get on a program, and fortunately I had investigated all of these programs by that time and had read literally hundreds of books on these various alternatives. So before that, however, I had gone to a doctor because I had developed a lump and I wanted a diagnosis. So I had a biopsy, had a lumpectomy, but even before I had that, the first doctor that I went to refused to even do a lumpectomy for diagnosis unless I agreed to have preoperative chemotherapy. Why? I said, I'm not going to have chemotherapy whether it's benign or malignant. And he said, well, my reputation is at stake. So his reputation was clearly more important than my life. And it says in that booklet, it's all about breast cancer, and it says that your doctor has the right to refuse treatment if you refuse to go along with their therapy. This is the only case that I know of, other than financial lack of financial ability to pay, that I know where a doctor is allowed not to treat a patient. As you well know from newspaper articles, if you refuse to treat an AIDS patient, you are sued, brought up before the Attorney General, and you may spend a lot of your resources or even time in prison. But you can easily, as a physician, refuse to care for someone if they have cancer, if they refuse chemotherapy or radiation. What is disease? Sort of wild thing that comes out of the sky, out of nowhere, and it just attacks you and just starts eating up your body. And that there's really nothing you can do about it. I did not know the tremendous association between nutrition and health. Once you get indoctrinated into it, you start thinking those people don't have any idea what they're doing, and we who are super educated have the answers. Since the cancer war started in 1971, when Richard Nixon signed the legislation, the cancer incidence and the cancer deaths have skyrocketed. The pharmaceutical companies control everything. They give the funding to the medical schools. They control the curriculum from a very high level. If you talk to teachers in medical schools, which I was for many, many years, they don't know that. This is manipulated at a very high level, and it's done quite subtly. And so even the people who are giving out the propaganda do not realize how much they've been misled. Disease was defined over 100 years ago by a woman, Ellen White, who wrote a lot on health, and she defines it like this: disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. There are no diseases other than occasionally a bacterial infection. And of course that's with antibiotics, which are becoming more and more of a problem. But all other diseases, there are no cures for them. Of course, we in medicine decide that we'll just cut out this offending lump or cut out this offending organ. And that's what we do. And I'm a surgeon. We just figured that we can, well, you know, your arm's a problem, we'll cut it off. And your stomach's a problem, we cut it out. Your intestines aren't working, let's cut them out. And of course, if I said many times, what do they do if you got a headache? You see? And even worse than that, you know, such a familiar piece of information with men, if you have a venereal disease and you go to the doctor, you'd certainly prefer for them to fix it rather than bring the scalpel to your rescue. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things. This is the darkness that we're in medicine. We just go in and say, what bothers you? Well, we can take care of that. We'll just cut it out. I was in my 20s. I had been raised a vegetarian, and you say, well, how can a vegetarian get cancer? I'll tell you, just as many articles come out saying that they're good for you, and they increase your bone density and all that, as come out and say that they're harmful. Nobody has to be on hormones. 300 years ago, there were plenty of people that were doing very, very well, and nobody was on hormones. But we think that we progressed, and we have all these medicines and quick fixes, but what we've really done is we have deteriorated and gone down into a big black hole from which we as a civilization don't seem to be climbing out of very readily. And the only sustenance you get is when someone brings you in a Coke or a 7-Up and slips a straw under your mask so you can drink some sugar water and get nourished. But your body can only take so much, and I had tremendous energy, and I worked 80 to 100 hours a week for all of these years. I got probably 4 hours of sleep a night for 20 years, and I was going great guns, but then, of course, I hit the wall. I never smoked. I never drank except for a glass of wine here and there, but I abused my body in other ways. Not only that, when the AIDS epidemic came along in 1987, and I started speaking out on the right side in the AIDS epidemic for healthcare worker safety, my life became embroiled in all sorts of controversy. All of these television shows that they mentioned I was on, and many others, and for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been on 250 to 300 radio shows a year, different radio shows. All of these are confrontational because the people out there, even though some of them are supportive, many of them will assault you for your views. So even when you're trying to speak out for the right, it bleeds a lot of energy from you. And it starts making you angry at what's going on in the world. And when you think you can change it, and all of the people who are your supporters come and say to you, oh, well, you have the knowledge, you have the ability, you speak out, you've got to lead the way, and people rally around, and you feel that if you don't do that, you're letting people down. But all the time, it continues to bleed your energy. My life was threatened by the government. My life was threatened by the AIDS activists because they didn't think it was right that I felt that they should take responsibility for their actions and their behavior. And these were very serious death threats. When you're living with that also, it takes a certain amount of energy out of you, and your body starts breaking down. But of course you don't know it at the beginning because the signs are very subtle. And I had to let it go. So how do you let your life go? How do you change your whole life? At that time, I was making my living on the radio. My books were being sold. My tapes were being sold on AIDS. But I was always in a confrontational state. For the right reasons, of course, and I feel on the right side, I still do, but constantly confrontational. The body can't stand that. By that time, I had a lot of enemies. There were a lot of people who had spitefully used me. There were people who were threatening my life. If we hold our anger, if we are unpleasant in our dealings with other people, if we're always in the confrontational or assaultive mode, or if we just shrink when someone comes at us with an assault, whether it is in the home, with verbal battles, or whether it is in our work, or whether it's with our children, all of these things affect our body. A friend of mine was in a car, drove into her garage. The garage light went out before she could get out of her car, and she stepped out on a snake. And she jumped back in the car, and here she was in the dark in her garage. Nobody was home, and she'd stepped on this snake, and she didn't know what to do. But she sat there, and she shivered and shook for a while. And, all of her adrenaline started running, and all these changes were taking place in her body. So finally, she got enough courage to get out of her car and step at least past the place where she'd stepped before, and she ran over and turned the light on the garage, and it was the garden hose. And troubles are going to be coming more and more. As you know what's happening in society, taxes are going to only go up and up. The laws are getting so restrictive that you can't. If you try to open a small business, you know what it is. You hire one employee, you know what it is. And this is going to become worse and worse and worse. If we're constantly worried about those things, our body cannot assimilate what we put into it. This crowd, I hope none of you go to doctors, do you? You're all too healthy? Nobody's on any medication here, I hope. Nobody's taking any medication for high blood pressure, for their heart, for anything else, not taking any drugs. You have already found the cause of your illness and have turned it around so you're not having any symptoms. But in case there might be one or two of you here who are still hearkening to some of those things, realize that even though I was at a relatively high level in medicine, as vice chairman of the department of the university right here in this city, right down the street from here, I didn't know. None of my colleagues that are still doing this know. Of course, David Kessler, who's head of the FDA, doesn't have a clue. And Anthony Fauci, who's in the NIH, and all of these people, they don't know. They're throwing billions of dollars, your dollars and mine, into research that is going down a very dark road. And of course, the people who are on the board of directors of all of the major cancer hospitals and the NIH are the pharmaceutical company vice presidents. These are the people who are in total control of what is taught, where the research money goes, and where the drift of medicine is going. So again, we have to keep this in mind, that there are a lot of forces out there that are working against Americans being healthy. Cancer and other diseases are huge business. Cancer is a $100 billion business a year. You must know some people who, if they were in danger of losing even $1 million, would be willing to lie or scheme. When you have hundreds of billions of dollars of business under your control, you don't want to lose that. So a lot of people will play with the truth in a major way. And you say, well, they wouldn't really want to let people die. Well, if 500,000 people just for cancer lived every year instead of died, you have 1 million extra people living every 2 years. Those people who are going to get old and collect Social Security and all of the other benefits. And you say, oh, well, they wouldn't be that cruel or evil. Well, think about it. You've had enough antagonism, I'm sure, from some of your friends trying to tell them about Barley Green, because many of us are very hard-headed until we run into great problems ourselves. But these kinds of things are always going on. It's going to get more and more restrictive. I have friends who are in prison who are alternative doctors. They are trying to take them totally out of the scene of medicine because they truly, at the very high levels, do not want people to be healthy and well. Every medical school in the country would be on the verge of bankruptcy tomorrow if alternative medicines were freely available to the public, because they depend on their cancer centers to support them. So this is all big business. When I was a young assistant professor, I had no idea of the business involved. And the average general practitioner or even specialist in private practice has no idea of the depth of control that big business has over everyone in orthodox medicine. So in closing, I just want to tell you what my creed has become. And this is the way that Barley Green will do, and of course the superzymes and all of the aloe vera and all of the other products can work to make people healthy. If I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames as a martyr, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. So I say, this is from 1 Corinthians 13, praise the Lord, love your enemies, and take your barley green. Thank you.
Barley green is recognized the world over as the finest green juice available. What sets barley green apart from its competitors? First and foremost, it is you, the distributors, who believe in barley green and how a healthy diet can improve the quality of life. It's also the care taken in the production of barley green. Come along as we tour the barley green production facility in Oxnard, California, and see for yourself how the patented manufacturing process helps make barley green the best in the world.
Welcome to Oxnard, California, home of the barley fields of AIM International, manufacturers of barley green, enjoyed by more health-conscious people the world over than any other green juice. Here, steady ocean breezes combine with clean water and rich soil to offer perfect conditions for growing the barley used to make barley green. Year-round cultivation ensures a steady supply of nutrient-rich barley leaves. Barley leaves grown using chemical-free farming techniques. To guarantee the freshest product possible, AIM locates their state-of-the-art processing facilities adjacent to the fields so that barley green manufacturing begins immediately after harvest. Harvest starts when the plants reach between 10 and 14 inches in height. Within minutes, the freshly cut leaves are transported to be washed and processed. Along with water, most manufacturers use bleach to wash the leaves. However, the barley leaves that go into barley green are washed using ozone that's injected into the wash water. Ozone kills any bacteria that might be present, and unlike chlorine, doesn't leave any toxic residue. The washed barley leaves are then put through a low-pressure juice extractor. This low-pressure extraction method not only juices, it protects the active nutrients in the juice, like enzymes. Soon after extraction, the juice is cooled and de-aerated. This prevents the juice from prematurely oxidizing and losing its nutritive value. The final and most important step is drying the juice into the familiar form of barley green. The key to the process is this unique dryer that can turn juice into powder without using high temperatures. If temperatures were too high, the nutrients would be changed and lose some of their effectiveness. A patented spray drying method dries the juice at room temperature. The juice is then sprayed onto a water-soluble complex carbohydrate called maltodextrin. This keeps enzymes and other molecules separated so they don't lose their natural qualities. Most manufacturers do not juice. They simply grind sun-dried leaves into powder. Unfortunately, this destroys most of the active enzymes. And because the few nutrients that remain are trapped in undigestible fiber, these products offer few benefits when eaten by humans. See for yourself. Here's barley green and 3 leading competitors upon mixing. After standing for 30 minutes, you can see how the others separate and discolor, with the heavy fiber settling to the bottom of the glass. However, barley green remains barley green right to the last drop. No other product is made with this devotion to quality. No other product is made with this commitment to health. Barley Green, the best green juice there is.
Imagine you're taking a tour of the inside of your body. It's completely fascinating. There's your heart, lungs, it's all larger than life. And as you see it all up close, you're astounded by the complexity of the various systems. But still, everything seems to be the way you thought it would be from what you learned about in school. All pretty much what you expected. That is until you reach the intestinal system. You're shocked and horrified to discover that taking up permanent residence on the inside lining of your large intestine are literally hundreds of foreign organisms, microscopic creatures known as protozoa. But from your vantage point, they appear anything but microscopic. These aren't the friendly native bacteria that assist in the breakdown of food, but rather dangerous and possibly fatal single-cell animals, better known as parasites. They seem so at home, and that's because they are. They're the unwelcome guests at a permanent party, and your body has become the host. This month, the Your Health Today segment shines a light on what has often been termed the silent epidemic. Parasites can be broken down into two categories: worms such as round, hook, tape, thread, and pin, and the lesser-known type we just mentioned, protozoa. Amoeba, giardia, and toxoplasma all fall under this classification. How widespread is this problem? What are the symptoms? What health problems do parasites create? And finally, if you're playing the host to these dangerous guests, what can you do about it? We spoke with several experts in an effort to find you some answers. First up, let's look at the size of the problem. Is it really a cause for concern?
It may surprise you to know that parasites are more common than anyone believes. And that's because in the past, parasites have been thought to have been only tropical diseases. But since we've become a global community, parasites are literally affecting at least 50% of the population and probably more.
In my practice, parasites are very common. When I was in medical school, I was taught that parasites are rare except in foreign countries. It's not the case now, at least. I find that as many as 70% of my chronically ill patients are carrying parasites.
It is said that if we could take the bone and the flesh out of somebody, we would still see a good facsimile of a healthy person now. That's not a sick person. We would still see a good self-image of them because of all of the bugs, the parasites, the molds, the fungi, and maybe tapeworms that are growing on the female body.
Well, parasites are indeed linked to some of the major health problems today. In fact, they're proving to be the hidden problem behind such things as autoimmune diseases, degenerative diseases, chronic fatigue, Epstein-Barr, and many of the modern-day plagues that are hitting mankind.
From my experience, parasites are a very big problem in the United States today because many Americans visit other countries, and we usually watch out for the water, but we're not too concerned about the food. And I found that my parasite was probably picked up in foods from another country. And also our food and water is contaminated in the United States, and we're not taught this, or we don't even consider that an option, that we could have parasites in the United States just like I.
Dr. David A. Darbrough and Dr. Mary Ruth Swope speak about Barley Green.
Hello, I'm Dr. David A. Darbrough, and it's so good to be here to talk to you about some nutritional information that you may find to be interesting, and then put it all together as to how this relates to a wonderful product called Barley Green. I think it's no more than fitting that we give you some of our credentials. I've been in family practice for a number of years. I'm a medical doctor. Been here in Indianapolis, Indiana for that length of time, and after so many years in medicine, I've made a switch into preventive medicine, which means that you're using the things that the good Lord made us with to help us to get better. Edison said at the turn of the century that the doctor of the future will give no medication, but will interest the patient in the care of the human frame and in nutrition and exercise and the like of that. So that's the story on me, and even more, much more important than me is Dr. Mary Ruth Swope. And I'd like to introduce Mary Ruth Swope, who has been an educator and a wonderful blessing to many people. And Mary Ruth, what is your background?
Well, most of my undergraduate work was done at Ohio State in foods and nutrition, and then I got a master's degree in foods and nutrition from the University of North Carolina, and then at the doctorate level I went into education. So I'm a nutrition educator and have taught in several universities. In fact, Purdue University was one of those.
Is reeling over these poisons that we're putting down. They may taste good,
yes,
but indeed the question is, are they good for us because of the side effects, the serious side effects? Well, barley green is an alkaline food, which is sorely needed to counterbalance all the junk food. So if anyone out there is having a lot of junk food and you want to hang on to those junk foods, let me tell you, very seriously consider barley green to counterbalance that. There's before us a little model of what can happen if you let this continue. Now this is a beautiful, beautiful example of what a normal artery should be like, this little rubber model. You see how wide open that is? Ask it around. There. That's like a shotgun shell. That's what we want. But as you have this imbalance of calcium and the like of that, and the highly acidic foods and all kinds of other things, too many fats, what happens, folks, is you get a little teeny rifle hole here, and the blood can't go through that very well. And as I open this up and show it, you can see how it goes from up here, where it's wide open, and gradually this fat and clog and things of that nature from those French fries, for one thing, and from the hamburgers and so on, folks. You can't feel this. There are no nerve endings. You don't know this is going on, and you wind up with a type of little thing like that. And this is, of course, much harder over here to squeeze on than this, so it's not only inflexible, but you therefore have a hardened artery because all this calcium that's in there, and then high blood pressure comes about. And what do we have that's killing 1 million of us every year in America? But heart attacks. And do you know what the very first sign of a heart attack is? The very first sign, what would you think it is? Well, a lot of people say, well, my goodness, it's going to be chest pain. Or maybe it's pain in the arm, or maybe it's nausea, or maybe it's something like that. Wrong. The first symptom, the first sign of heart problems, of a heart attack for the first time in, I believe it's 40% of people, is sudden death. So barley green, back to barley green. Barley green can prevent this hardened artery thing. And I wanted to bring up another thing that I know. It's not uncommon in osteoporosis for someone to, a lady...
You know, Dr. Hagawara, the man who wrote this book, Green Barley Essence, and the man who discovered barley green, he made the statement that after he had analyzed, well, I believe it was at the time he'd analyzed 150 green plants, and now it's about 300 green plants. He said that barley green is the richest, most balanced source of nutrients in a single food on the face of the earth.
This ties into what Hippocrates said, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. He said, man has the power within himself to heal himself. Well, I believe God placed within us the power to heal ourselves. He placed within us the body's own doctor.
That's right.
Which knows far more than we who are the outside or exogenous doctors as to what this body needs to make it healthy. And if we supply this body with the proper foods, Hippocrates also said, if I'm not mistaken, that food is the best medicine.
In 20 years' time, we'll have nutritional obliteration in this nation.
Not nuclear, but nutritional.
That's right, nutritional obliteration.
It's been stated also that if we continue the way we're going, that by the year 2000, 100% of our gross national product will be spent on medical needs.
Yes.
So I think that barley green is very timely, a very timely product for the needs of our nation. And yesterday, I want to talk a little bit about what people have noticed when they take barley green. Our time is running out, and I wanted to share, because this is where it really, the rubber meets the road. Does it work or doesn't it work? Regardless of whether it's got things in it that neutralize toxins and poisons, or chlorophyll, or SOD, and whether SOD is absorbed or not is immaterial. Does it work? I mean, we in medical science cannot explain at the present time how digitalis works, and yet we use it. day after day. Ask any cardiologist, but ask them how it works. Please tell me how it works. I don't know, yet it works. So if barley green, if taking that food helps, take it. Give it a try. Give it a whirl. It's not going to hurt you.
Right.
It's going to help you. Universally, and you folks out there, ask yourselves this. Do you wake up feeling tired? Do you get tired after you eat? Well, now that is kind of opposite to the way it should be. You would think after you rest all night long, you ought to wake up boundless full of energy. You would think that after you eat something that has energy in it, your body should feel energetic. And if that's not so, something isn't right. And I would suggest you see some nutritionally minded physician who can help guide you along the pathway to bringing you back. And with all of these folks, they might put them on barley green. And I can't say all. No, never all. You never say all. But with the greatest majority of these people, they notice an increase in energy.
Yes.
They notice a feeling of better. And you wrote a book about are you sick and tired of feeling sick and tired?
Right.
So
I have to say, though, Dr. David, I wrote that book before I'd heard of barley green. See, 1 teaspoon of barley green meets your need for mustard greens, collard greens, kale, and all those things we don't like. So it's an instant food.
We've got 2 minutes to talk, and I would like to say that with all of the things that are in barley green, it is a food. It's something that the Lord provided. It's nothing that man has come up with.
Yes.
That anyone who has any problem at all, ranging from malignancy all the way up and down the line to diabetes and high blood pressure and whatever, to see if this won't help.
Yes.
It can't hurt the person.
And how about
start
for
out,
infants? Do you recommend it for children?
Yes, yes I do. Of course I do. And particularly, it is good for mothers. Child carrying, who are carrying infants while the pregnancy is going on because of the high calcium, because of the high iron, and because of the folic acid. You know, the greatest vitamin deficiency in this country today is folic acid. And the neural tube defects have been traced down by Dr. Jonathan Wright, who was to neural tube defects being secondary to folic acid deficiency in the first 27 days or so after pregnancy occurs, after conception. Boy, our time is gone. We've only got 1 minute to go, and there's just so much more that we could share. Maybe we'll have to do another one of these sometime or other.
I can believe that.
I wanted to say what I'd recommend for people to do is to start out with like a half a teaspoon of barley green every day.
Yes.
And just half a teaspoon in an empty glass, squirt a little water on it, instantly dissolves. It's nature's blessing made instant.
Right.
And then chug it.
That's
and
right.
do it on an empty stomach.
And if people don't like it, don't like the taste just with water, with fruit juice, it's just delicious. You can't taste it at all.
Yes. Well, folks, it's just been wonderful to talk with you and to share this information. If you'd like more information, call Dr. Mary Ruth Swope at the what you just saw on the screen, and may you
One man is taking on the establishment on the issue of AIDS. In light of what we've been told, his views are startling. Although homosexual contact is responsible for 93% of AIDS cases among white men, Gary Null says that there have been no cases of AIDS reported among a group of vegetarian homosexual men living in New York. On the other hand, 96 to 100% of gay men with AIDS used a recreational drug called poppers. Null also says that AIDS is not 100% fatal and maintains that it is possible to have AIDS and get well. Furthermore, he says it is not necessary to spend billions of dollars researching a cure for AIDS. I'm Tony Brown. When we come back, can this man cure AIDS?
Tony Brown's Journal is brought to you by Pepsi and its bottlers. This program is part of Pepsi-Cola's continuing support of your community's cultural, educational, and business interests.
Our first question.
I'd like to know if there is a cure for AIDS. If this is true, why is the information not available right now?
If you mean a cure, is there a way of taking a person who has AIDS and putting them into remission? The answer is yes. I've interviewed over 100 individuals, persons with AIDS, and ARC, people who have had Kaposi sarcoma, which is the purplish raised blotches, cancer-like lesions over their skin, men with pneumocystis, carini, which is a parasitic infection of the lung that kills over 58% of all persons with AIDS. Cachexia, the wasting away, making a person look like a concentration camp person. All of those conditions have been reversed. All of those conditions have been completely normalized. So the answer to the question, from my perspective, is I have seen treatments. There are treatments. Unequivocally, yes, there are successful treatments for AIDS. They are non-toxic. They are not drug-based. And these are being kept from the American public. The reason they're kept, I don't know. Is it money? Is it because AIDS is the hottest new growth industry, like cancer was for years? I don't know. But the fact is that the recent issue of the New England Journal of Medicine that went out in the stands now, the recent issue of the American Medical Association Journal that's out on the stands now, the two most prestigious organizations and their publications, 7 to 8 full pages in color are for AZT. One drug. It does not cure, it has terrible side effects, and it only helps a very small percentage of the persons with AIDS get over some of their symptoms. And yet where that gets 8 pages, and every doctor in America that I'm aware of has gotten a cassette from Burroughs Wellcome, the manufacturer, plus promotional material talking about AZT. They say it costs $10,000 per year per person to treat you with AZT. Well, irrespective of ATZ, it's not a cure, and it's got terrible side effects for a lot of people. Why doesn't the AMA, and why doesn't the New England Journal of Medicine, why doesn't C. Everett Koop, why doesn't Robert Gallo, the king of AIDS research in America, why don't they test syphilis, cerebral syphilis? The moment you come into contact with syphilis, it goes to the brain, central nervous system, and the eyeball. The one place that it cannot be dealt with by traditional penicillin. If they did with aqueous penicillin, that's a penicillin that goes through the blood-brain barrier, so it can attack the syphilis and kills the syphilis, the spirochetes. They would found what Dr. Stephen Chiesa, an internist in New York City, found in every one of his patients with AIDS. He was able to eliminate all symptoms of AIDS and keep those symptoms gone by doing nothing more than giving an inexpensive, intravenous, aqueous penicillin. That's not the old-fashioned penicillin where you get 2.45 million units in the rump with a single injection. That doesn't get past the blood-brain barrier. So that doesn't do anything to the syphilis. It's cerebral syphilis. And yet in every one of the persons with AIDS, after they had died in autopsies, everyone had syphilis. So here we've got all the people who have got syphilis, and the people who are being treated with aqueous penicillin are going into remission. That's only one of 6 treatments that work. Intravenous vitamin C. Dr. Robert Cathcart, the developer of the hip prosthesis, and a very respected man on virology. In fact, Dr. Cathcart has treated more persons with pneumocystis, with mononucleosis, with Epstein-Barr virus successfully. Now, you hear about the Epstein-Barr virus. They say it's connected to AIDS. We don't know that's true. In fact, in China, a recent report showed that almost 100% of the population has Epstein-Barr virus. It may be ubiquitous in our society, but it's not lethal. It only triggers itself after you've had a massive infection or your immune system's gone down the tubes. Well, he's able to help these people, put them right back up to snuff by intravenous vitamin C. Now,
vitamin C.
Vitamin C.
Ascorbic acid.
Yes. And he is able to take persons with AIDS and get them healthy. It doesn't kill the virus. Neither, by the way, does the aqueous penicillin kill the virus.
We're going to hear more in a moment, but let me introduce you first. We've been listening to our guest, is the author of a series of health articles in Penthouse Magazine, which is where I first read you, a faculty member at the New School for Social Research in New York, and has published over 40 books on health and nutrition. Mr. Gary Null. Mr. Null, another part of this lady's question was, if you have this kind of information that could be so beneficial to the American public, and I don't think there's anyone in America who is normal, who is not worried about the AIDS virus, because all we see in the latest phase of the AIDS so-called educational campaign has been what I call a scare the heterosexuals campaign. In other words, a man and a woman together, sex will kill. Now, that line is kind of straight. Do you believe that the variable in AIDS is sex?
No, I do not.
What is the variable in AIDS?
Drugs.
Drugs.
Drugs and syphilis. Do you know that there are 2 million New Yorkers with syphilis that's causing it? Now, in Africa, syphilis is rampant. The spirochetes are rampant, and syphilis-like conditions are rampant. And in our population, the people that we see who are coming down with the diseases, including intravenous drug users, hepatitis with the intravenous drug users, syphilis with the intravenous drug users, syphilis with those promiscuous homosexuals who have also lowered their immune system. Again, no one from the Surgeon General's office, no one from the CDC ever went into the homosexual population. I don't know any homosexuals. So I went into their community and I interviewed them. And I interviewed over 160 from one group, the kind that more or less are the stereotype. Right or wrong, that's what we got in our mind. The guys that take the drugs, and every one of them told about having repeated sexual encounters. And Tony, you wouldn't believe this. I found it hard to believe that these people would have as many as 7 orgasms a day, average, most through masturbation, but as many as 20 sexual contacts at some of these bathhouses a night. And they had had repeated bouts of infectious hepatitis and parasites in the intestine and in the liver and in the lungs. And yet, here's another group that didn't smoke, that didn't drink, that took vitamins, that exercised, that were vegetarians. Now, they also had sex. They had no less sex than the other group. The difference was, and there's always going to be an element of bias where people don't want to be honest with you, but even accepting a margin of error, they had been tested, their blood was clean.
This was another group of homosexuals.
Another group of homosexuals. So simply to say that AIDS is a homosexual disease doesn't wash. Now they're going to say, mark my words, AIDS is a black disease. Mark my words. You're going to hear it. You're going to we always need a scapegoat. They're going to come down on the black community. But how many, and I defy anyone in medicine to show me any healthy American that's got AIDS. Do any of you know a healthy person that's got AIDS? No. We're supposed to have an epidemic. If we have an epidemic, remember the first criteria of an epidemic is that it must affect everyone equally. Epidemics do not isolate themselves to certain segments of the population. Everybody's equally susceptible. I've spoken with thousands of people. I have a radio show on ABC on Sunday nights, and I have yet to find any of the hundreds of thousands of people who've written me or spoken to me who know anyone who's got AIDS or who has AIDS, and yet when I go into the risk groups, the drug addicts, it's rampant. So what we've got, the real cause of AIDS, is syphilis, malnutrition, chronic abuse of your immune system, and then a virus. Taken in total, it's a relatively infinitesimal percentage of the American population. 1 million people died of heart disease last year. That's not an epidemic. 480,000 died of cancer. That's not an epidemic. 23,000 have died in 8.5 years of AIDS. Suddenly, that's an epidemic.
Mr. Null, getting back to your syphilis variable, is it true that 90% of the syphilis cases in New York are among homosexual men?
And drug users, and those who, if you study their lifestyle, and again, because they're going to say they're black and Hispanic, what they're not saying is that these are not your average black and Hispanic. You know, if you look at your average black person, and I don't claim to be an expert on lifestyles of black people. I did write the book Black Hollywood many years ago, and I don't know if anyone ever heard of that, but I spent 7 years at the Schoenberg Library, and I know that all the people that I spoke with over the years, and I have a lot of blacks in my audience, these are people that are no different than white people in the audience. You take on certain middle-class values, or you take on certain dietary and cultural habits, you take care of yourself. But if you suddenly are one of those people, white, black, or Oriental, who abuse yourself, who don't care about yourself, then suddenly you're still a member of that particular race that you come from. Now you become the norm for that race in the eyes of people who want to criticize that race. So when you look at the black community, the vast majority of the blacks take care of themselves. And for those small element in New York City or in some other city that don't, who are on heavy drugs, no matter what their age, they're going to suddenly be used as the whipping person for the whole race. Those are the people who are getting syphilis. Those are the people who've got AIDS. Those are the people who should be treated.
Let's talk about the heterosexual scare, as I call it. Do you share that belief?
I do not believe heterosexuals are at risk of AIDS, and I cannot, and if we were, we would have seen the evidence. We would have seen the evidence years ago. I do believe that you can make yourself susceptible by direct blood contact through intravenous blood use, or through if you were having an operation. But if you're having an operation, you're not healthy. You're having an operation because you've been in an accident or something's wrong. So your immune system is very depleted. Then you have something introduced into your blood. Then you're susceptible. And by the way, AIDS in the blood bank is very high. AIDS virus. The syphilis in the blood bank is astronomical. And spirochetes, and we're not being told about that.
Would you say that people like Liberace and Rock Hudson and this gentleman, Bennett, I think was his last name, who recently expired, they weren't taking care of themselves and they were on drugs and they had syphilis? Would you say that in relation to what you just said?
Rock Hudson was one of the worst examples of health I could imagine. You see, in our society, we make one big mistake about health. We assume that if we're not in a hospital, we're healthy. Well, there are levels of health. There are degrees of health, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And lack of obvious symptoms of a disease is not in itself a statement that you are healthy. Rock Hudson drank like a fish. Now, drinking alcohol destroys the immune system. It destroys enzymes in the liver, so you can't metabolize vitamins. You show me anyone that drinks regularly, and I'll show you someone with a vitamin B1 deficiency. That, in turn, is essential for the immune system. It also destroys zinc. Zinc, a mineral, is crucial for the immune system. And yet nowhere in this whole panic on AIDS are you having the people say, let's look at who doesn't have AIDS, and let's see why they don't have AIDS. That's the point, Tony. If you're going to be the CDC and you're going to tell people, all right, everybody's equally susceptible, and terrorize people, even people who've been monogamous in a relationship are terrorized now. I actually know couples who've told me that they're using condoms when they've been married and have had no other sexual contact. I mean, that's how paranoid. I mean, if sex might have gotten a little boring beforehand, it's going to be...
All right, let's go to the antioxidants you introduced. You talked about vitamin C, you just mentioned B1, you just mentioned zinc, and I'm now going from many of your books that I've read over the years. You are talking about antioxidants.
Yes.
All right. Would you give us some of the names of antioxidants, A
Sure.
and B? Tell us succinctly as possible what they do to maintain a strong immune system.
All right. Well, that's the whole point. If I'm going to fight any disease, I want to look at both extremes. Someone who has been exposed in the same environment but not gotten the disease, and someone who's in that environment and gotten the disease. What you find in between the two is going to be a way of helping protect you, right? So the people who are not getting the disease have a strong immune system. What helps a strong immune system? Antioxidants. Antioxidants help destroy free radicals. Free radicals, picture this. Picture an all-metal cylinder and someone shoots a gun off in it. That bullet's going to keep ricocheting around in there. Well, when you have a free radical, which is an unstable molecule, you can get it from cigarette smoke, from alcohol, from eating processed meats. Sodium nitrate causes free radicals. Pesticides, free radicals. Pollution in the air, free radicals. Well, we can't escape free radicals because of the society we live in. But these free radicals can attack the cell. The cell has a very sensitive sheath over it. When that sheath's been penetrated, then the sensitive nutrients inside your cell are killed. It's what's called a ceroid pigment. You age the cell. As you age the cell, you age. So the primary reason for aging is the destruction of the cell by free radicals. So needless to say, to slow down the aging process, to keep your immune system strong and vital, you need free radical scavengers or antioxidants. Vitamin C, top of the list. And I really, really feel that we must begin to challenge this supercilious notion put out by many doctors that we don't need vitamin C supplements. We do. You take a person that's eating a good diet, 100 to 1,000 milligrams minimum would that person need, because during the day, sunlight destroys vitamin C. Get angry, that destroys vitamin C. Pollution destroys vitamin C. Stress destroys vitamin C. Now, if you have a cold, you could go up to nearly 15, 20,000 milligrams before your body's absorbed enough. You get mono, 100,000 milligrams. Do you know that drug addicts are being successfully treated and breaking all addiction of their drug with 100 to 200,000 milligrams of vitamin C by a doctor in California? That's the primary therapy, no other drug therapy. People who smoke, they can take upwards of 20, 30,000 milligrams of vitamin C in a detox program under medical supervision.
No, is this Dr. Cathcart?
Cathcart's helping. This is Dr. Libby.
All right, tell us about Dr. Cathcart's treatment of AIDS patients with vitamin C.
All right, by the way, Tony, just briefly, beta-carotene from vegetables or from a non-toxic form of vitamin A is an antioxidant.
Vitamin A.
Vitamin B6 is an antioxidant, and also glutathione is an oxidant, an amino acid, and very important is selenium, the mineral, and zinc, the mineral. Now, Dr. Robert Cathcart has treated more persons with AIDS successfully, putting them into improved condition, prolonging their life, than any other doctor in America. Right here in New York City, you've got a 91-year-old physician named Dr. Emmanuel Revisi, R-E-V-I-C-I. Dr. Revisi gives the patients fatty acids. He's the world's leading authority on fatty acids, but these are known as refractory fatty acids. These specifically stimulate the body's immune response. Cathcart, vitamin C, stimulates immune response. Now, Revisi's patients, I've interviewed so many. In fact, it was interesting. I was going to invite, your producer said, could I get one on the show today? There was a lawyer, professor from a major university here. They didn't want to come on. You know why? Because they no longer have any of the symptoms. They are healthy now. All their blood chemistry, their white cell, T cell count is normal. They said if we go on television and people knew that we have AIDS or had the active AIDS, we would be discriminated against. And so they didn't want their identity known. But Cathcart gives intravenous vitamin C plus an anti-candida diet. Very important, this diet, Tony, for everyone interested in health, because America is in the stages of chronic lethargy, chronic fatigue. On your skin, in your mouth, and your gut, you have normally residing there different types of fungus, and you have a yeast called candida, candidiasis. Under normal conditions, that's all right. But when your diet is high in refined carbohydrates, sugars, or fermented foods like a lot of vinegar, then that proliferates. Now, what initially triggers the proliferation is birth control pills, antibiotics, or steroids. Now, think of all the people who suffer from arthritis who take the steroids, or who have colds or something and take broad-based antibiotics, or women who take birth control pills, or combinations of those really sets the stage. And now this fungus starts to get 2, 3, 10, 15 times more than what it should be there. Fungus and yeast is a living entity. Every living entity has a byproduct. The byproduct is a gas that goes into the system, and it pollutes the body. It can cause everything from mood swings to depression to chronic fatigue to irritability to arthritic flare-ups. So by cleansing your system, by staying away from yeasted bread, yeast period, and that includes yeast and B-complex vitamins, you get non-yeast vitamins, and fermented products, no vinegar or anything that is made with vinegar, you can start to rebalance yourself. Now, acidophilus, which is a very vital growth stimulator in your intestine, acidophilus helps, for instance, milk to curd. That's important. Caprylic acid helps kill the yeast. And there's an herb called podarco, which is important too. All of these things help reestablish a normal medium in your intestine. He has found that when he reestablishes normal medium with an anti-yeast diet, gives them intravenous vitamin C, and has them check any of the negative things in their lifestyle, stay off the drugs, recreational drugs. And by the way, for years, the CDC didn't consider recreational drugs as a part of its hard drug category. Had they made recreational drugs, amyl nitrate, which devastates the immune system, poppers, devastates it. Do you know that that would have been the single biggest category of persons at risk of AIDS? But they conveniently left that and cocaine and marijuana. They left all that out. They said intravenous. Well, there's no difference between affecting your immune system with intravenous drugs and sniffing it up your nose, or taking it, smoking it, or taking the amyl nitrate. All of them are devastating to the immune system.
Mr. Hull, why is it that AIDS is so prevalent in Africa among heterosexuals and so prevalent in the United States among homosexuals?
All right, in Africa it's prevalent because for years those people who have reached a certain affluency unfortunately have accepted the notion of having either mistresses or going to prostitutes. And in many of the countries, prostitution is not considered a crime. It's openly accepted. These prostitutes on a regular basis go into their doctor's office or a clinic to get their gonorrhea shot. They'll use the same needle 1,000 times. So every woman coming in every week is being reinfected. They in turn can turn around and infect the man. The man in turn is spreading syphilis. Now the syphilis then starts to lower the immune system. And taking the syphilis with an AIDS virus, you've got a lethal and potent combination. In one country, Zambia, syphilis was found to be the primary mortality death cause in almost 30% of the children. 15.8% of the adult population in a conservative test that's not accurate were shown to have syphilis. If they had used a more accurate test, it's estimated that upwards of 80% of the population would have had syphilis. So syphilis, if it's in a dormant state in the brain, doesn't kill. Lower the immune system and syphilis can go crazy. But here's what we are. All of us have viruses. We all have microbes. We all have cancer cells. Everyone has a cancer cell in them. You have multiple cancer cells. But not everyone gets cancer. Not everyone gets sick. You could be around someone with a cold. You don't get the cold. Why? Your immune system's strong. If we want to redirect proper attention on the war on AIDS, let's direct it to a health model. Let's learn something from this disaster instead of perpetuating the notion that the drug companies are going to come in and win the war. We have a medical Vietnam. We lost the war in Vietnam because we misdirected our energy, shouldn't have been in this whole nutsy position we were. We're misdirecting the war on cancer. We haven't cured any of the major cancers with traditional methods, and now we're going to do the same thing with AIDS. By the way, the same people who control the war on AIDS, cancer are now the very same companies controlling where the money's going and bringing out the drugs on AIDS.
Mr. Null, when you wrote me about being on this program, you challenged me collectively as a member of the media. And your letter was not written to me specifically, it was written to the media in general. And you charged that the media is ultimately a part of a conspiracy of keeping this information, whether you're right or wrong. There is a constitution and a right, a guarantee of free speech, that you are not allowed, and people who believe what you believe are not allowed to say this in the general media.
I absolutely agree with that, and I stand by that. Now, the conspiracy can be a conspiracy of ignorance as well as something more maniacal. Give you an example. I held a press conference. I had Dr. Kaeza, medical records, 100 medical records, documentation, Dr. Cathcart, medical records, patients, Dr. Revisi, medical records and patients. I invited every major member of the media in the United States, repeatedly invited them, sent them a press kit, sent them documents. Few came, and those who came didn't do anything about it. Why? Unfortunately, we have always relegated the responsibility for who is right to the orthodoxy in medicine. A reporter doesn't feel that they are capable of knowing the facts, or they're going to turn around and contact someone at the CDC or their so-called medical expert associated with their network or newspaper. And if that expert doesn't believe that AIDS and syphilis are related, or vitamin C has anything to do with health to begin with, and most doctors don't even begin in vitamin C to begin with, then they're going to say there's nothing to it, it's quackery. So that reporter, instead of doing investigative journalism, instead of reporting, and what we've got in America now, with few exceptions, we've got reporters who unfortunately have been used as propagandists for the special industry and special interest groups instead of real hard-nosed reporters.
And unfortunately, using your word, we're out of time, and you've been a great asset. Thank you very much, Mr. Null.
Tony Brown Productions produces this program and is solely responsible for its content.